Elizabeth Ellington's hands trembled as the stagecoach hit another rut in the road, sending her lurching against the side panel. Dust billowed through the small window, coating her already travel-worn wedding dress in a fine layer of Dakota Territory grit. 300 miles of hard travel, a broken axle, and now a summer storm brewing on the horizon, all conspiring to ensure she would miss her own wedding to a man she'd never even met. How much further to Sundown Springs? Elizabeth asked the driver when they stopped to water the horses. The weathered man squinted at the darkening sky. "I reckon another 4 hours, madam, if we don't get caught in that storm. You're already 2 days late for your appointment. As if marriage to Harold Blackett, the banker she knew only through correspondence, was nothing more than a business transaction. In many ways, it was exactly that her father's dying wish had been for her to find security after his passing. A proper husband with proper means, he'd insisted. But as the rain finally broke and the stagecoach crawled through mud towards Sundown Springs, Wyoming Territory, in the summer of 1875, Elizabeth wondered what waited for her in a town where she knew no one, arriving too late for her own wedding. The stagecoach pulled into town well after nightfall, the street lamps casting eerie shadows through the downpour. Main Street was deserted except for a tall figure standing beneath the overhang of the Sundown Hotel, hat pulled low, water dripping from his duster. Last stop, Sundown Springs. The driver called as he set the brake. Elizabeth gathered her sodden skirts, clutching her small valise as the driver helped her down. Her legs nearly buckled from exhaustion as her boots sank into the mud. The figure under the overhang stepped forward, and Elizabeth's heart sank. This couldn't be Harold. Her intended was described in letters as short and bookish, not this towering presence. "Miss Ellington." The man's voice was deep, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. Elizabeth nodded, water streaming down her face. "I'm terribly sorry about the delay." "Is Mr. Blackett waiting at the church?" The stranger's face remained shadowed beneath his hat, but she caught a glimpse of a strong jaw, days of stubble, and was that a hint of amusement? "Madam, the wedding was supposed to be 2 days ago." He took her valise. "I'm Gabriel O'Connor, ranch foreman at the Triple Creek." Elizabeth felt the world spin slightly. "Mr. Blackett married Widow Parker yesterday afternoon." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd traveled halfway across the country, spent nearly every penny to her name, endured weeks of discomfort all for nothing. "I see." Her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I suppose I should inquire about return passage in the morning." Gabriel O'Connor stepped closer, lifting his hat to reveal piercing blue eyes that studied her with unexpected gentleness. "Return to where, Miss Ellington?" The question hung between them as Elizabeth realized she had nowhere to return to. Her family home had been sold to pay her father's debts. She had no family left. "I don't know," she whispered. Gabriel nodded as if he'd expected this answer. "I've been waiting for you instead." Elizabeth blinked. "I beg your pardon, not like that," he added quickly, a slight flush crossing his weathered face. "Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house asked me to wait for the stage. She's kept a room for you, figured you'd still need a place even if—" He trailed off. "Even if I arrive too late for my own wedding," Elizabeth finished. Gabriel offered his arm. "It's a good town, Miss Ellington. Better than Harold Blackett deserved. If you'll allow me, I'll escort you to Mrs. Henderson's place." Elizabeth hesitated only briefly before taking his arm. What choice did she have? As they walked through the rain-soaked streets, she realized the journey she'd planned, the life she'd imagined, had ended before it began. But perhaps something else was just starting. Mrs. Henderson proved to be a blessing in disguise. The plump, gray-haired proprietress of the sundown boarding house clucked sympathetically as she ushered Elizabeth inside, barely acknowledging Gabriel beyond a grateful nod. Poor dear, traveled all this way for nothing. Men, Mrs. Henderson bustled about, showing Elizabeth to a small but clean room. Harold Blackett never deserved a bride like you, showing up with his handkerchief permanently attached to his nose, always sneezin', and marrying Widow Parker. She's welcome to him. 10 years older than him with 2 grown sons. Elizabeth sank onto the narrow bed, utterly spent. I don't understand. Our arrangements, Mrs. Henderson scoffed. That man arranges his socks by color. Couldn't wait 2 days for his bride. Shameful, after Mrs. Henderson finally left her in peace. Elizabeth allowed the tears to come. Not for Harold Blackett, she'd never loved him, but for her own foolishness. For believing that security could be found in the arms of a stranger. For having nowhere else to go. The next morning brought clear skies and terrible clarity. Taking stock of her finances revealed barely enough for a week's lodging and meals. She would need employment, and quickly. Main Street revealed Sundown Springs to be larger than she'd initially thought, a proper town with a church, school, mercantile, bank, saloon, and various other establishments. Elizabeth's practical nature asserted itself as she straightened her spine and marched toward the schoolhouse. The schoolteacher, Miss Winters, a severe woman with spectacles perched on her nose, informed her they had no need for assistance. We have only 28 children, Miss Ellington. 1 teacher is quite sufficient. The general store, the dressmaker, and the hotel all gave similar responses. By midday, Elizabeth found herself standing outside the bank, Harold Blackett's bank, debating whether her pride could withstand begging for employment from the man who had jilted her. Miss Ellington. She turned to find Gabriel O'Connor leading a magnificent chestnut horse down the boardwalk. Mr. O'Connor. She nodded politely, noticing in daylight how the sun brought out reddish highlights in his dark brown hair. Found work yet? His directness was refreshing after a morning of polite rejections. Is it that obvious? His mouth quirked into a half-smile. Small town. Word travels fast that the would-be Mrs. Blackett is looking for employment. He gestured toward the bank. I wouldn't bother. Harold's feeling mighty uncomfortable about the whole situation. As well he should, Elizabeth muttered, then blushed at her own impropriety. Gabriel's smile widened. Mrs. Miller at the cafe is looking for help. Her last girl ran off with a cattle buyer. Elizabeth glanced down at her hands, soft, uncalloused, unsuited for serving food and washing dishes. But they were capable hands that could learn. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. I'll inquire immediately. Gabriel nodded, then hesitated. Triple Creek could use a tutor for the ranch hand's children, too far for them to come to town every day. He adjusted his hat. Just something to consider if the cafe doesn't work out. Before Elizabeth could respond, he tipped his hat and continued down the street, the chestnut horse following docilely behind. Mrs. Miller hired her on the spot. Can you count change and carry plates without dropping them? That's all I need. The work was exhausting but straightforward. Elizabeth served hungry cowboys, traveling salesmen, and town residents from dawn until mid-afternoon. Her feet ached, her back screamed in protest, but the $3 per week plus meals would keep her housed while she decided her next move. After a week, Elizabeth had settled into a routine. Wake before dawn, help prepare for breakfast service, serve until the midday rush ended, then collapse into bed at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. The work left little time for socializing, which suited her just fine. Each face that entered the cafe was a reminder that everyone knew her humiliation. Gabriel O'Connor came in every Wednesday when he brought ranch supplies into town. He always sat at the same corner table, ordered the same meal, beef stew and cornbread, and left a generous tip. They rarely exchanged more than pleasantries, but Elizabeth found herself looking forward to Wednesdays. On the third Wednesday, Gabriel arrived with a book tucked under his arm. "For you," he said, sliding it across the table when she brought his coffee. "Ranch is quiet in the evenings. Thought you might want something to read." Elizabeth picked up the volume Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. A smile tugged at her lips. "How did you know?" he shrugged. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned you were a reader, said your books got lost on the journey. This was my mother's." The gesture was so unexpected that Elizabeth found herself blinking back tears. "Thank you, I'll take good care of it." "Keep it," he said, his eyes warm. She'd have liked knowing it found a good home. That evening, Elizabeth read by lamplight until her eyes grew heavy, losing herself in a familiar story that suddenly seemed more poignant than ever. The following Tuesday, disaster struck. Elizabeth was carrying a heavy tray of dirty dishes when a traveling salesman backed into her path. The collision sent plates, cups, and food scraps flying across the cafe floor. Mrs. Miller's face turned thunderous. "That's the third time this week. Those dishes cost money." She shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Elizabeth, face burning with shame, knelt to clean the mess. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller, I'll be more careful, no need." Mrs. Miller's voice was cold. "I'll find someone with steadier hands. You can finish today's shift." Elizabeth's heart plummeted. Without this position, she couldn't afford to stay at the boarding house. By evening, everyone in town would know she'd been dismissed. That night, she packed her few belongings and counted her meager savings. Not enough for a ticket anywhere meaningful. The knock at her door startled her. "Mr. O'Connor." Elizabeth was shocked to find Gabriel standing in the hallway. "Heard about the cafe," he said without preamble. "Offer still stands. Triple Creek needs a teacher. $5 a week, room and board included." Elizabeth hesitated. "It would be improper. You'd have your own cabin. The schoolroom's the old bunkhouse. 8 children ages 5 to 12. His expression softened. "It's honest work, Miss Ellington. Independence ward with practicality." "When would I start?" "Tomorrow. I've got the wagon." Elizabeth considered her options and found them woefully limited. "I'll need to speak with Mrs. Henderson." "Already settled your bill," Gabriel said. "Figured you'd say yes." She should have been offended by his presumption, but found herself fighting a smile instead. "You're very sure of yourself, Mr. O'Connor. Only when I'm right." His eyes crinkled. "Pack warm. Nights get cold at the ranch." The journey to Triple Creek Ranch took most of the next day. As they left Sundown Springs behind, Elizabeth felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. The rolling hills gave way to rugged country, with stands of pine trees and rocky outcroppings. Gabriel pointed out landmarks as they traveled. "Creek there marks the edge of Triple Creek land. Ranch runs 20 miles north to south, 15 east to west." Elizabeth's eyes widened. "That's enormous. Decent size for cattle country, nowhere near the biggest spread in Wyoming." Gabriel handled the team of horses with easy confidence. "Owner's a good man. Jackson Thornton built it from nothing 20 years ago. And you're his foreman," Gabriel nodded. 5 years now. "Started as a hand, worked my way up." As they crested a rise, the ranch headquarters came into view, a sprawling main house built of solid logs, several outbuildings, corrals, and a cluster of smaller cabins. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and smoke rose from chimneys. "It's beautiful," Elizabeth murmured. "Home," Gabriel replied simply. They pulled up to a small cabin set slightly apart from the others. "This is yours," Gabriel said, helping her down from the wagon. "Used to belong to Mrs. Thornton's mother before she passed. Been empty a couple years." The cabin was small but sturdy, with a front porch facing east. Inside, Elizabeth found a main room with a fireplace, a small bedroom and basic furnishings. Someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the table and laid a fire ready to light in the hearth. Mrs. Thornton fixed it up for you, Gabriel explained, carrying in her trunk. Schoolroom's just over there. He pointed to a long, low building about 100 yards away. Children will come at 8, leave by 4. Their parents are hands on the ranch. Mr. O'Connor, Gabriel, he interrupted. Everyone uses first names here. Gabriel. Elizabeth tried the name, found she liked the feel of it on her tongue. Thank you for this opportunity. He regarded her steadily. You're doing us the favor, Elizabeth. These kids need learning more than I need an extra hand who can't tell a cow from a horse. His bluntness startled a laugh from her. I'm not completely ignorant of country matters. We'll see. His eyes twinkled as he stepped back toward the door. Supper's in the main house at 6, Mrs. Thornton's eager to meet you. After he left, Elizabeth explored her new home. The bedroom held a comfortable-looking bed with a handmade quilt, a small dresser, and a washstand. The main room contained a table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair by the fireplace, and simple shelving. Basic, but far more private than the boarding house had been. She unpacked her few belongings, washed away the travel dust, and changed into her second-best dress before walking to the main house for supper. Her stomach fluttered with nerves as she approached the imposing structure. The door swung open before she could knock. A tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked dark hair smiled warmly. Miss Ellington, I'm Sophia Thornton. Welcome to Triple Creek. Elizabeth was ushered into a home that defied her expectations. Rather than rustic, the interior was refined, with quality furniture, bookshelves lining the walls, and tasteful decorations that spoke of travel and culture. My husband built the house, but I insisted on bringing civilization with me, Sophia explained, following Elizabeth's gaze. Jackson indulges my Eastern sensibilities. Dinner was served in a formal dining room, where Elizabeth met Jackson Thornton, a barrel-chested man with a booming laugh, and several of the senior ranch hands, including Gabriel. The conversation flowed easily around her, ranch matters mingling with world events. These people were informed, intelligent, and surprisingly sophisticated for their remote location. We subscribe to 3 newspapers, Sophia explained when Elizabeth commented on their knowledge of Eastern politics. Living in the wilderness doesn't mean surrendering to ignorance. After dinner, Jackson outlined her teaching duties. Most of these children have had spotty education at best. Some can barely read, others are quite advanced. We trust you to assess and teach accordingly. I'll do my best, Mr. Thornton. Jack, he corrected with a smile. And we know you will. Gabriel speaks highly of you. Elizabeth glanced at Gabriel, who was suddenly very interested in his coffee cup. Does he? Says you've got grit, Jack replied. High praise from him. As the evening wound down, Gabriel offered to walk Elizabeth back to her cabin. The night was clear, stars spread across the sky in dazzling profusion. I've never seen so many stars, Elizabeth murmured. City lights dim them, Gabriel replied. Out here, nothing gets between you and the heavens. At her door, Elizabeth turned to him. Why did you bring me here, Gabriel? Truly, he considered her question carefully. Partly because we need a teacher, partly because you needed a place. He paused. Mostly because I thought you deserved better than washing dishes and being gawked at by every fool in Sundown Springs. His honesty disarmed her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you meet those children tomorrow. His smile flashed white in the darkness. Sleep well, Elizabeth. Teaching at Triple Creek proved challenging but rewarding. As Jack had warned, the 8 children varied widely in abilities and temperament. 10-year-old Timothy could calculate complex sums in his head but struggled with reading. 7-year-old twins Abigail and Andrew fought constantly, but showed remarkable artistic talent. 5-year-old Sarah barely spoke, but absorbed everything around her with solemn eyes. Elizabeth adapted, creating individual lessons while fostering a sense of community among her diverse students. She found unexpected resources in the ranch's extensive library, which Sophia enthusiastically opened to her. The days fell into a rhythm. Teaching during the day, quiet evenings in her cabin reading or preparing lessons, and weekly dinners at the main house where she gradually came to know the ranch community. Gabriel remained something of an enigma, always polite, occasionally teasing, but maintaining a careful distance. One evening about a month after her arrival, Elizabeth was returning from the schoolhouse when she heard the thundering of hooves. A group of riders approached at speed, Gabriel at the lead. As they drew closer, she could see they were supporting a man who was slumped in his saddle, blood darkening his shirt. "Elizabeth," Gabriel called, "run ahead. Tell Mrs. Thornton to prepare the surgery room. Elizabeth gathered her skirts and ran to the main house, delivering the message to a suddenly businesslike Sophia, who immediately began issuing orders to the household staff. Within minutes, the injured man, a ranch hand named Patrick, was laid on a table in a small room off the kitchen that was indeed equipped like a surgery. Sophia moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away the bloody shirt to reveal a deep gash across the man's side. "Cattle rustlers," Gabriel explained tersely as he helped position the injured man. "Ambushed Pat while he was checking the north fence line." Elizabeth found herself pressed into service, boiling water, holding instruments, and eventually assisting as Sophia cleaned and stitched the wound with remarkable skill. "Where did you learn to do this?" Elizabeth asked as they washed blood from their hands afterward. "Necessity," Sophia replied grimly. "Nearest doctor is 2 days' ride. Out here you learn or people die." That night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep. The image of Patrick's wound, the smell of blood, and the grim faces of the men who'd brought him in haunted her. Around midnight, she wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and stepped onto her porch for fresh air. A solitary figure sat on the corral fence, silhouetted against the moonlight. Gabriel. Before she could retreat inside, he turned and saw her. "Can't sleep," he called softly. Elizabeth hesitated, then walked toward him, conscious of her inappropriate attire but too troubled to care. "Is Patrick going to be all right?" Gabriel nodded. "Sophia's patched up worse. He'll have a scar to brag about." Elizabeth shivered, not entirely from the cool night air. "I've never seen violence like that before." "Part of life out here," Gabriel said, then seemed to reconsider. "Shouldn't be, though." "Who were they? The rustlers?" Gabriel's face hardened. "Same gang that's been hitting ranches across 3 counties, led by a man named Ritter. Used to work for the Blackwood outfit until they caught him stealing." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the night sounds of the ranch washing over them. "I wasn't always a rancher," Gabriel said suddenly. "Went to college back east, engineering." Elizabeth looked at him in surprise. "What happened?" "War happened. Came home different." His voice held old pain. "Couldn't stand being closed in anymore. Needed sky overhead." The confession made her brave enough for her own. "I wasn't always going to be a mail-order bride. I was engaged once to a boy from my hometown, Charles." Gabriel waited silently for her to continue. "He died in the war, Shiloh." Elizabeth hadn't spoken Charles's name aloud in years. "After that, my mother passed. Then father fell ill. When he died, the creditors took everything. I had a choice between becoming someone's charity case or finding my own way." "So you chose Harold Blackett." Elizabeth laughed without humor. "I chose wrong, evidently." Gabriel's hand found hers in the darkness, warm and calloused. "Maybe not. Brought you here, didn't it?" The simple touch sparked something inside her that she thought had died with Charles, a flutter of possibility, of future. She pulled her hand away gently. I should go back. It's inappropriate. This whole territory is inappropriate by Eastern standards, Gabriel interrupted with a smile. But you're right, you should rest. Children will have 1,000 questions about Patrick tomorrow. He walked her to her cabin door. Good night, Elizabeth. Good night, Gabriel. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Elizabeth found herself settling into ranch life with unexpected ease. The children were making remarkable progress, particularly Timothy, who had finally broken through his reading block. The other ranch families had accepted her, bringing small gifts of preserves or handwork, inviting her to Sunday gatherings. And then there was Gabriel. Their midnight conversation had shifted something between them. He began stopping by the schoolhouse after lessons, sometimes bringing interesting rocks or plants for the children's nature collection, other times just to walk her back to her cabin. Their conversations ranged from books to ranching techniques to politics. Elizabeth found herself looking forward to these walks more than anything else in her day. One crisp October afternoon, Gabriel arrived at the schoolhouse with 2 horses. Thought you might like to see more of the ranch, he offered as the children ran off toward their homes. Elizabeth eyed the smaller of the 2 horses dubiously. I haven't ridden since I was a girl. Daisy's gentle as a lamb. She'll take good care of you. An hour later, Elizabeth was laughing as they cantered across an open meadow, her initial nervousness replaced by exhilaration. Gabriel led her to a ridge overlooking a spectacular valley where the Triple Creek property stretched toward distant mountains. It's magnificent, Elizabeth breathed, dismounting to stand at the edge. Jack's looking to expand further north, Gabriel said, coming to stand beside her. Another 1,000 acres next spring. Is that why those rustlers targeted you? Because the ranch is successful? Gabriel's expression darkened. Partly. Ritter also has a personal grudge against Jack. Used to court Sophia before she chose Jack. A rejected suitor, Elizabeth murmured. Dangerous combination, wounded pride and greed. You understand men better than you let on. Elizabeth smiled wryly. I understand human nature. Pride makes people do terrible things, speaking from experience. His question was gentle, perhaps. Elizabeth sighed. I was too proud to accept help after Father died. Too proud to admit I was desperate when I agreed to marry Harold. Pride has rarely served me well. Gabriel studied her face. I disagree. Pride kept you standing when life knocked you down. That's not weakness, Elizabeth. That's strength. Their eyes held, and Elizabeth felt that flutter again, stronger now. Gabriel stepped closer, and for a heart-stopping moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached out slowly and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. We should head back, he said softly. Storm coming. Indeed, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. They rode back to the ranch at a brisk pace, arriving just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Gabriel helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist longer than necessary. Thank you for today, Elizabeth said, reluctant to end their time together. First of many, Gabriel promised, his eyes warm with something that made her heart race. Sunday after church, if you're not busy, I thought we might ride to the south pasture. The aspens there are turning gold. I'd like that very much. The Sunday ride became a weekly tradition. Elizabeth found herself counting days between these outings, savoring Gabriel's company in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. He was becoming important, too important for someone who had already lost so much. As winter approached, bringing the first dusting of snow to the high country, the threat from rustlers intensified. More cattle disappeared, and neighboring ranches reported sightings of Ritter's gang. Jack doubled the night patrols, and Gabriel often rode out before dawn, returning long after dark, exhaustion etched on his face. Elizabeth worried. The easy rhythm of their developing relationship stuttered under the strain of his increased responsibilities. Their Sunday rides were canceled twice in a row as Gabriel joined search parties looking for stolen cattle. On the third Sunday, Elizabeth was sitting in her cabin reading when a knock came at her door. Gabriel stood on her porch, his face grim. "May I come in?" Elizabeth stepped back, concern flooding her. "What's happened?" "Ritter's gang hit the Matthews place last night, burned the barn, took 20 head of cattle." Gabriel's voice was tight with anger. "Shot John Matthews when he tried to stop them." "Is he?" "Alive, but barely." "Jack's organizing men from 3 ranches. We're riding out tonight to track them down." Elizabeth's heart constricted with fear. "That sounds dangerous." "It is." Gabriel met her eyes steadily. "I wanted to see you before we left." The unspoken hung between them that he might not return. Elizabeth swallowed hard against sudden tears. "You'll be careful, as I can be." His gaze softened. "Been thinking, Elizabeth." When this is over, she pressed her fingers to his lips. "Tell me when you come back." Gabriel caught her hand, turning it to press a kiss to her palm. The gesture was so tender, so intimate that Elizabeth felt it like a physical touch throughout her body. "I'll come back," he promised. After he left, Elizabeth paced her small cabin, too agitated to read or sleep. The thought of Gabriel facing armed rustlers terrified her. She had lost one man she cared for to violence. She couldn't bear to lose another. The realization stunned her. She cared deeply for Gabriel O'Connor, perhaps even loved him. The feeling had grown so gradually she hadn't recognized it until this moment of potential loss. 3 days passed with no word. Elizabeth taught mechanically, her mind constantly straying to Gabriel and the other men. The ranch felt hollow with so many hands away, the remaining women and children subdued and anxious. On the 4th day, as Elizabeth was dismissing her students, the distant sound of hoofbeats made everyone freeze. Then Timothy let out a whoop. "They're back. Pa's with them." Children and women rushed outside as the riders approached. Elizabeth hung back, scanning faces desperately until she found the one she sought. Gabriel rode at the front beside Jack, his face weathered and tired but gloriously, wonderfully alive. Their eyes met across the yard, and the smile that broke across his face warmed her to her toes. He dismounted and handed his reins to another hand, then walked directly to her, seemingly oblivious to the celebrating families around them. "You're back," Elizabeth said, her voice catching. "Told you I would be." His voice was hoarse from trail dust. "And Ritter's gang, most captured." "Ritter escaped, but he's wounded. Won't get far." Gabriel reached for her hand. "Elizabeth," before he could continue, Sophia called everyone to the main house for food and news. The moment broken, Gabriel offered Elizabeth his arm, and they joined the gathering where Jack explained how they'd tracked the rustlers to an abandoned mining camp and with the help of a U.S. Marshal, apprehended most of the gang. Ritter took a bullet in the shoulder, Jack concluded. Marshall's tracking him now. Doesn't think he'll survive the week with that wound and winter coming on. After the meal, as people began dispersing to their homes, Gabriel walked Elizabeth back to her cabin. The early December evening was already dark, stars pricking the velvet sky. "What were you going to say?" Elizabeth asked as they reached her porch. "Before you left," Gabriel took both her hands in his, "that I've been thinking about us, about you." He drew a deep breath. "When I first saw you that night in Sundown Springs, standing in the rain looking like you'd lost everything, I felt something I can't explain." Elizabeth's heart hammered in her chest. "Gabriel, let me finish," he said gently. "I've watched you rebuild your life here." Seen your strength, your kindness, your determination. These past months getting to know you." He paused, seeming to search for words. "Elizabeth, I think I'm falling in love with you." The confession hung in the crisp night air. Elizabeth felt tears spring to her eyes. "I thought I'd never love anyone after Charles," she whispered. "I was wrong." Gabriel's face lit with hope. "You feel it too." In answer, Elizabeth rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened as Gabriel's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I should go," Gabriel said reluctantly. "This is already pushing the bounds of propriety." Elizabeth laughed softly. "I think we left propriety behind when I kissed you on my porch in full view of anyone who might be watching." "True enough." He smiled, touching her cheek tenderly. "May I call on you properly? Sunday dinner at the main house." "I'd like that very much." Gabriel's courtship was as direct and honest as the man himself. They spent every available moment together riding the ranch boundaries, reading aloud by her fireplace, joining the community gatherings that marked the approach of Christmas. With each day, Elizabeth's feelings deepened, her initial attraction blossoming into something profound and lasting. 2 weeks before Christmas, Gabriel took her to their ridge overlooking the valley, now blanketed in pristine snow. He seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting with his hat as they stood admiring the view. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Elizabeth said, breathing in the crisp winter air. "Not half as beautiful as you." Gabriel turned to face her, taking her gloved hands in his. "Elizabeth, I know it's only been a few months since you came here, but I feel like I've known you my whole life." Elizabeth's breath caught as Gabriel sank to one knee in the snow. "I'm not Harold Blackett. I can't offer you a bank or a townhouse. All I have is my position here, my savings, and my heart." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "But if you'll have me, I'd be honored to spend my life making you happy." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a small diamond. "Elizabeth Ellington, will you marry me?" Tears sprang to her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to gather her in his arms, spinning her around until they both fell laughing into the snow. His kiss tasted of joy and promise. "When?" he asked, helping her to her feet and brushing snow from her coat. "After Christmas," Elizabeth suggested. "Give us time to prepare." "New Year's Day," Gabriel decided. "Start the year as husband and wife." News of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch. Sophia immediately took charge of wedding preparations, insisting they hold the ceremony in the main house. "My wedding gift to you both," she declared. "We'll transform the great room. Every ranch family will attend." The days leading to New Year's passed in a whirlwind of activity. Elizabeth found herself embraced by the women of Triple Creek, who helped her create a new wedding dress from fine blue wool Sophia had been saving. Children crafted decorations, and the men prepared for the feast that would follow the ceremony. On New Year's Eve, Elizabeth could hardly believe how much her life had changed in just a few months. From destitute and jilted to beloved, and on the verge of marriage to a man who cherished her. As tradition dictated, she spent her last night as a single woman with Sophia and the other ranch women, who shared advice and stories until late into the night. The next morning dawned clear and cold. From her window, Elizabeth could see ranch families arriving in wagons and on horseback, bringing food and gifts. Her heart swelled with happiness as she prepared for the ceremony scheduled for noon. Sophia helped her dress, arranging Elizabeth's dark hair with sprigs of winter greenery. "You look radiant, my dear." "I feel it," Elizabeth admitted, smoothing the simple but elegant blue dress. "I never expected to find this kind of happiness again. Love finds us when we least expect it." Sophia said wisely. Now, are you ready to marry that handsome foreman of ours? Elizabeth nodded, gathering her small bouquet of dried flowers and evergreens. More than ready. As they made their final preparations, a commotion arose outside. Elizabeth heard shouts and the pounding of hooves. What on earth? Sophia moved to the window. Oh no. What is it? Elizabeth joined her, peering out to see a rider galloping toward the main house, waving urgently. Even from a distance she recognized Jack's distinctive form. Sophia's face paled. Something's wrong. They hurried outside where Jack was already dismounting, his expression grim as he spoke to Gabriel. Other men gathered around them, voices raised in alarm. What's happening? Elizabeth called, hurrying toward them. Gabriel turned, his face a mask of controlled fury. Ritter, he's back. Hit the south range and drove off 30 head of breeding stock. Elizabeth's heart sank. Today. But the wedding, that's why he did it, Jack growled. Knows we're all here. Timing's deliberate. Gabriel took Elizabeth's hands. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. We have to go after them before they get the cattle across the state line. No, she whispered, fear clutching at her. Not today, not our wedding day. I don't have a choice. His eyes held hers, pleading for understanding. Those cattle represent next year's calves, the ranch's future. And Ritter's dangerous if we don't stop him now. He'll keep coming back. Elizabeth knew he was right, but the timing felt like a cruel joke of fate. Again, she would be the bride whose groom was elsewhere. Only this time her heart was fully invested. When will you return? She asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. 2 days, maybe 3, Jack answered when Gabriel hesitated. We've sent for the marshal, but we can't wait. Gabriel pulled Elizabeth aside. We'll have the wedding when I return, I promise. You had better come back to me, Gabriel O'Connor, Elizabeth said fiercely, fighting tears. I did not travel halfway across the country to lose another man I love. His kiss was quick but passionate. I will always come back to you. Within the hour, 15 men, including Gabriel and Jack, rode out, heavily armed and grim-faced. Elizabeth watched them disappear into the distance, her wedding dress a cruel reminder of dashed hopes. Sophia put an arm around her shoulders. They'll return, and we'll have an even bigger celebration. The guests who had come for a wedding stayed for an impromptu prayer service instead, asking for the safe return of their men. Elizabeth moved through the day in a fog of disappointment and fear, accepting condolences and reassurances with as much grace as she could muster. That night, alone in her cabin, she finally allowed herself to cry not just for the postponed wedding, but for the danger Gabriel faced. Ritter had already shown he was willing to kill. What if Gabriel didn't return this time? 2 days stretched into 3, then 4 with no word. Snow began falling on the 3rd day, further stoking Elizabeth's fears. By the 5th day, even Sophia's optimism was flagging. They must have tracked him further than expected, she said as she and Elizabeth prepared dinner for the remaining ranch hands. Jack knows this territory better than anyone. They'll find shelter. On the morning of the 6th day, Elizabeth was teaching when Timothy burst into the schoolroom, eyes wild with excitement. Riders coming. Lots of them. The children stampeded outside despite Elizabeth's calls for order. Following them, she shielded her eyes against the winter sun, heart in her throat as she counted the approaching figures. 15 had left. She counted 16 returning. As they drew closer, she saw cattle being driven ahead of the riders. They'd recovered the stolen herd. And there, riding at the front beside Jack, was Gabriel. Even at a distance, Elizabeth could see he was slumped in the saddle, and fear knifed through her. The riders reached the ranch yard, and Elizabeth pushed through the gathering crowd. Gabriel was being helped from his horse by 2 other men, his left arm bound in a makeshift sling. His face was pale beneath several days' growth of beard, but his eyes lit when he saw her. "Elizabeth," he breathed as she reached him. "You're hurt," she said, gently touching his arm. "Bullet grazed me. I've had worse." He tried to smile but winced instead. "We got the cattle back, and Ritter," she asked. A shadow crossed Gabriel's face. "Dead. Tried to ambush us in a canyon. Didn't end well for him." The 16th rider dismounted nearby, a stern-faced man with a U.S. Marshal's badge who was leading a pack horse laden with what Elizabeth realized were bodies. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. Gabriel nodded. "It's over. Marshal Daniels has the surviving gang members in custody." Sophia took charge, ordering hot water and bandages brought to the main house while directing the exhausted men toward food and rest. Gabriel refused to be separated from Elizabeth, insisting he was fine despite evidence to the contrary. Once inside, Sophia examined his wound with practiced hands. "Clean shot through the muscle. You're lucky, Gabriel." That's what the marshal said. Gabriel managed a tired smile for Elizabeth, who hovered anxiously nearby. "I'm fine, truly, just need rest and stitches," Sophia added firmly. "Elizabeth, would you assist me?" Together they cleaned and stitched Gabriel's wound while he gritted his teeth against the pain. When they finished, Sophia tactfully withdrew, leaving them alone. "I'm sorry about our wedding," Gabriel said, taking Elizabeth's hand. "You came back," she replied simply. "That's all that matters." Gabriel's eyes held hers intently. "Marry me tomorrow." "But your arm, the men are exhausted." "I don't want to wait another day," Gabriel interrupted. "Life's too uncertain, Elizabeth. These past days taught me that. I want you as my wife, come what may." Elizabeth's heart swelled. "Then yes. Tomorrow." Their wedding took place the following afternoon. The main house was once again filled with ranch families, the great room transformed with winter greenery and candles. Elizabeth wore her blue dress, Gabriel a clean shirt that accommodated his bandaged arm. Jack performed the ceremony, his booming voice filling the room with time-honored words. "Do you, Gabriel O'Connor, take Elizabeth Ellington to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Gabriel's voice was strong and sure. "And do you, Elizabeth Ellington, take Gabriel O'Connor to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Elizabeth smiled up at the man who had waited for her that rainy night, who had offered her a new beginning when all seemed lost. "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me as justice of the peace for this county, I pronounce you husband and wife." Jack beamed at them. "You may kiss your bride, Gabriel." The kiss was gentle but filled with promise. Around them, the room erupted in cheers and applause. Elizabeth felt a profound sense of rightness, of coming home after a long journey. The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was dancing despite Gabriel's injury, feasting, and many toasts to the newlyweds. As the night drew to a close, Jack approached them with a key. "Wedding gift," he said, pressing it into Gabriel's hand. "Cabin on the West Ridge, been renovating it for months. Sophia says it's ready now." Gabriel's surprise was evident. "The old Carson place." "But that's yours now," Jack finished. "Land deeds inside. 10 acres to start your own spread someday if you want, or stay on as foreman. Your choice." Elizabeth watched tears gather in her husband's eyes. "Jack, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll both be happy there," Jack replied gruffly, clapping Gabriel on his good shoulder before moving away. Their new home proved to be a charming 2-story cabin nestled in a grove of pines with a view of the mountains. Inside, they found it fully furnished with a mixture of practical ranch pieces and more refined items from Sophia's collection. "It's perfect," Elizabeth breathed, exploring the cozy rooms lit by lantern light. Gabriel watched her, his expression tender. "Perfect because you're in it." Later, as they lay together in their new bed, the bonds of marriage newly sealed between them, Elizabeth traced the line of her husband's jaw in wonder. "I still can't believe how much has changed," she murmured. "6 months ago, I was traveling to marry a man I'd never met." Fate had other plans. Gabriel kissed her fingertips. "You were always meant to be here, Elizabeth, with me." "Because I arrived too late for my own wedding," she teased. "Because I've been waiting for you," he corrected softly. "My whole life, I think, without knowing it." Winter melted into spring, which bloomed into summer. Elizabeth continued teaching the ranch children, while Gabriel divided his time between foreman duties and improving their own small holding. They planted a garden, added a chicken coop, and began talking about expanding the cabin for the family they hoped to have. On their 6-month anniversary, Gabriel took Elizabeth back to the ridge where he had proposed. The valley below was lush with summer grasses, Triple Creek cattle dotting the landscape like mobile chess pieces. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely." Elizabeth leaned into his embrace. "Though I may be happier still in about 7 months. Gabriel turned to her, eyes widening as he processed her meaning. "Are you saying?" Elizabeth nodded, her smile radiant. "We're going to have a baby, Gabriel." His whoop of joy echoed across the valley as he lifted her carefully in his arms, spinning her around before setting her gently on her feet to kiss her soundly. "When did you know?" he asked, his hand moving reverently to rest on her still flat stomach. "I've suspected for a few weeks." "Sophia confirmed it yesterday." Elizabeth covered his hand with hers. "She thinks early February, a winter baby." Gabriel's smile was tender. "Boy or girl doesn't matter, just healthy and strong like its mother." Elizabeth felt tears of happiness gather. "I never imagined finding this kind of joy again. After losing Charles, after my parents died, I thought my chance for happiness had passed me by. And I never thought I'd find someone who understood me," Gabriel admitted. "After the war, I was different, couldn't settle, couldn't connect. Until you stepped off that stagecoach." They stood together, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains, the future stretching before them full of promise. "You know," Elizabeth mused, "I should really write to Harold Blackett and thank him." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "Thank him for jilting you, precisely." Elizabeth smiled up at her husband. "If he hadn't been so impatient, I never would have met the man who was truly waiting for me." Gabriel laughed, pulling her close. "His loss, my eternal gain." Their life together unfolded like the Wyoming season, sometimes harsh, often beautiful, always changing. Their son, Samuel, was born during a February blizzard, with Sophia serving as midwife and Gabriel pacing anxiously until his son's lusty cries filled their cabin. 2 years later, twin girls Charlotte and Grace joined the family, doubling their joy and exhaustion. Elizabeth's school expanded to include children from neighboring ranches, eventually becoming the official Sundown County school with Elizabeth as its respected headmistress. Gabriel continued as Triple Creek's foreman until Jack's retirement, when the Thorntons sold them a larger portion of the ranch at a generous price. The O'Connor spread grew steadily, becoming known for quality stock and fair dealings. Years passed. Their children grew tall and strong, educated in both books and ranch life. Samuel showed Gabriel's talent with horses, while Charlotte developed her mother's gift for teaching. Grace, the quietest of the three, revealed an unexpected talent for medicine, eventually studying with Sophia, and later traveling east for formal training, the first female doctor in the territory. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Gabriel and Elizabeth returned to Sundown Springs for the first time together. The town had grown considerably, with a proper train station and several new businesses. The bank still stood on Main Street, though Harold Blackett had long since moved on, selling to a larger institution based in Cheyenne. They stayed at the hotel where they'd first met, now a grand 3-story establishment. Standing on the street where Gabriel had waited in the rain all those years ago, Elizabeth took her husband's hand. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I'd arrived on time?" she asked. "If I'd actually married Harold Blackett," Gabriel considered this, "you'd have been miserable. Eventually, you'd have come into the cafe for lunch, and I'd have spilled coffee all over myself staring at you." Elizabeth laughed. "You sound very sure." "I am sure." Gabriel's eyes, still as blue as the Wyoming sky though now crinkled with laugh lines, held hers steadily. "Some things are meant to be, Elizabeth. Some people are meant to find each other, no matter what path they take to get there." That night, lying in each other's arms in the hotel where their story began, Elizabeth reflected on the long, winding journey that had brought her west. The loss and disappointment that had seemed so devastating had ultimately led her to profound joy. "I love you, Gabriel O'Connor," she whispered to her sleeping husband. "Thank you for waiting for me." In his sleep, Gabriel pulled her closer, as if even in dreams he couldn't bear to let her go. Outside their window, stars scattered across the Wyoming sky, silent witnesses to a love that had flourished in the wild heart of the West, proof that sometimes arriving too late was actually arriving right on time.